Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Natha Perkins of Electra Astrology. We're going to talk about something that is deeply ingrained in every single one of our lives. We absolutely cannot get away from it. We need it to live, and it helps us to more deeply understand what it is that we're doing here on this planet. So, can you guess what I'm talking about? And before I share the answer with you, if you like my style, you can find me at electraastrology.com. I offer mentorships, apprenticeships, private readings, zodiac journals, and lots of other stuff. So come find me there. And I'm releasing a lot of extra content these days, both on YouTube and on Star Narratives, my podcast platform. So whether you are a watcher or a listener, you can come find me. As you know, my teachings center around using astrology as a gateway into the self to more deeply understand this very complex, multifaceted being that you are, because I believe that the more of us that are tuned in to who we actually are, that can hold a sense of grounded presence with ourselves, that is the route to helping heal the planet, which brings me into today's talk. So we're talking about the heart. And it seems to me that there is a loss of heart connectedness that has become very common for all of us, where we are steered away intentionally by people that are trying to sell us products, people that want to control the way that we think, that want us to give our attention currency to something over here or something over there. All of that pulls us away from being connected to our heart. And the reason that we're talking about this is because the heart in astrology is connected to the sign of Leo. Mars is currently in the sign of Leo retrograde. Now, Mars is an identity planet, and the sun, which is the luminary that rules Leo, is also associated with identity. This question of who are we? We have to really know ourselves in order to know who we are, right? But knowing ourselves, like I just mentioned, is really complicated because there are so many things that pull us away from knowing ourselves. Life is very distracting, particularly now that we have screens, emails, the internet, and marketing. So things are very designed to distract us from ourselves. And I think that that's probably intentional because if we are spiritual beings and we are connected to a source connection, all of the distraction out there pulls us away from our source connection and instead puts our attention on all of the seductive, attention grabbing nuggets that are out in front of us. Then we are flimsy in our connection with source. Source energy is really the outlet that we can plug ourselves into to become recharged, to help us soothe our fears, to help us reality check our anxieties, to help us understand our anger and our resentment in a different, more powerful way. Being distracted, pulled away from our source connection, also means that we are distracted and pulled away from the self. A little astrology background: Aries, Mars, first house, those are the archetypes that rule how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. This is right the entryway into the zodiac. It also represents the rising sign. And it talks about our entry into this world as humans. We know that we get a lot of feedback from the people around us, beginning with our parents, our grandparents, our caregivers, and then our siblings, and then our connection to our teachers, our peers, our bosses, etc. But through all of those relationships, we are being perceived, and we are essentially being told who we are. Some of that is because we are being observed, but we're always being observed through the lens of somebody else's perspective. So you might be charming and cute to one person, and you might be annoying and obnoxious to another person. Really, what's the difference? Well, it's the perception of the person. So depending on who is perceiving us, we learn a lot about who we are, maybe, quote, who we are. And then we perceive ourselves in that way. Now, Mars is also where we learn to defend ourselves, where we ideally become our own biggest fans, our own biggest advocates, because when we walk into new situations, we have to learn how to survive. And so we learn a lot about who perceives us in certain ways and how to really work with that perception so that we get love and affection. We get our needs met. We get taken care of. Now, that is not who we really are, though, generally. That talks a little bit more about the part of us that is the fighter, the part that says, I'm scrappy, like I'll turn on whatever I need to do in order to be accepted by you people and to get what I need from you. So, our Aries part of our identity is definitely a part of who we are, but it's more about how we are responding to the people around us and what we need to do and be in order to get what we need, right? Mars is about getting our needs met. And then we look at the sun. Sun, Leo, fifth house are three archetypes that all belong to one another. And this is who we really are. This is who we are, as I say, when we're with our very best friends, who we can be our most obnoxious, loud, crass, sad, boring parts of us. So the sun version of us is also completely conditioned because, again, we are seen and perceived by the people in our lives. And we often learn a lot about who we are by how those people project or explain to us what they see. Sun is always related to the father as well. So your relationship with your father has a lot to do with who you take yourself to be. If you had a mean, condescending father, well, you might not feel good enough. If you had a loving, attuned father, you might feel really confident. So it works along those lines. And of course, nothing is ever black and white when we're talking about astrology archetypes. There are always spectrums that we're working with between in this case, I really know who I am and I have no clue who I am. And it sort of depends on the situations that we're in and the period of our life, the cycles of our life, as I've been talking about over the last few weeks while working with the asteroid series. So if you've missed those episodes, those are great ones to tune into. When we have Mars in the sign of Leo going retrograde, this brings our identity and the questions about who we are and what it is that we want, what it is that we love, what we are wishing to move forward toward with passion and purpose into the front lines. Now, a retrograde always slows us down. So Mars goes retrograde the very least of all of the planets. And so we have to pay attention to a Mars retrograde, especially given the fact that Mars is a very fast-moving planet. It is our warrior. It is our advocate. It is our hero. It is the one that moves into action to get the needs met and is willing to go to battle to get the needs met. So imagine this energy within you, this driving force, has to slow down. The brakes are being put on, and it can feel very uncomfortable in the body. It can bring up a lot of angst or a lot of irritation or frustration. It's like sitting in traffic where you just want to go to where you're trying to go to, and you keep running into this bumper to bumper. Stop and go, stop and go. And we all know we hate that. And yet that is the point of a Mars retrograde because we are meant with any retrograde to slow down and examine what is really happening here. And so in the case of Mars going retrograde in the sign of Leo, we are looking at our identity. And, one of the things about Leo that I think is really important to talk about, obviously, is the heart. Leo is connected to the heart, and it is through our heart that we come to really know who we are. So as we're trying to get rid of all of the conditioning of who told us about who we were as we were growing up and finding like, this is who I really am. An example, a lot of us were raised to be easy and polite. And so we grow up maybe thinking, I'm a very easy and polite person. But then as we start to get to know ourselves, we realize, I don't really like being polite, especially if it means that I have to abandon myself. When you're working with this as the energy that has been given to you in your chart and then is reflected over and over in your culture, in your society, you grow up thinking about yourself a certain way. And then you start to transform and you realize, I don't really enjoy that. That isn't really me. Because what we are seeking when we're trying to understand ourselves, and I talk a lot about this in my Leo episodes, so you can check those out too. We want to know ourselves through the lens of vibrancy, of generosity. We want to find the things that we feel magnetized to. We want to feel energized and inspired. And we know that when we find those things, that those are very big indicators that we have opened us some door into our very hearts that helps us explain who we are to ourselves. But that's all mental. On a very physical level, we need to connect in with our actual heart in order to know how it feels, in order to understand how we respond to something. Because we're very mental, which is our Gemini, and we like to think about what makes sense. Does it make sense that I'm really nice? Does it make sense that I want to go take this job? Does it make sense that I wouldn't want to eat cauliflower? And so when we're tuning in with our heart, we have to almost take our brains out of it. We have to take our conditioning out of it. And that's when we can literally tune into our physical heart to get a sense of what it feels like in there. So let's do that. So I invite you to close your eyes. And again, take some deep breaths and see whether you can bring your attention straight into your heart. And see if you can feel your heart beating. And sometimes this takes a minute. And if you can't locate that beat right away, you can always put your hand on your heart and just feel into it. What is going on in that location in your body? What emotions do you notice floating around in there? What I find happens is that the moment that I tune into my heart, I discover that there are so many emotions and so much going on in there that a moment before I had been very unaware of. And so, because we're so mental and our attention is intentionally pulled away for so many things, do this, buy that, think that, be careful, that connecting in with our heart is not second nature. And so, therefore, as we're trying to figure out what makes me feel creative and playful and energized, it's really hard to answer those questions. And so, tuning into your heart can be a really powerful practice. And you can do this at any time during any day for literally 30 seconds at a time. It's not a huge commitment. But as Mars is going retrograde in Leo, it is giving us the opportunity to slow down and feel and connect in with the heart. And I will say that one of the primary, if not the primary emotions that goes along with the heart is love. And taking some time to tune in to that quality of love, that feeling that you get when it is the most pure and you're petting your animals or you're laughing with your children or you're sitting in silence and gratitude with your partner. There are so many ways to experience love. And we know that when we're experiencing love, like there is this sense of connectedness that is there. And one thing that I've noticed, especially as we've had to go through this political season and watching people on TV and watching people on the internet, is that a lot of people, it's like they've lost touch with their hearts. There is no heart connection. It's all about the mental. It's trying to convince you. People are trying to convince you of something, or they're trying to sell you something, or they're waiting for you to stop talking so that they can start talking, or they're feeling this charge in their nervous system and they have to get it out. But it's like all of these things cut us off from our heart. And so as Mars is going retrograde, through the sign of Leo, it's this invitation to slow down and look at how easily you get disconnected from your heart-centeredness. And as retrogrades do, they ask us to dive into these questions around what could I do differently? How does this happen? How can I make this easier for myself? Because it feels good to connect with your heart. Even if what you're connecting into feels sad or heavy or sorrowful, there's something very rich about just being with your heart, being with yourself, being in a state of presence, because this connects us in with our source connection. And the source connection is the battery charger that we need to withstand life on this planet. Life is not very easy. There are elements that are amazing and that we love. And there are also a lot of hardships. We are here in earthly bodies doing work. It's hard work. But there's something about connecting in with the heart that helps you get centered and clear again. It helps you to better understand these questions around who am I? What am I here to do? What is my mission? What lights me up? What fills me with inspiration and creativity? And how am I willing to advocate for myself? How can I be my own hero? And so these are Mars in Leo in retrograde questions. If you are feeling apathetic, insecure, withdrawn, cold, cynical, resentful, these are all indications that you have lost touch with your heart. Now, as we go through any given day, it's entirely possible that we feel several of these things. We have moments of resentment, of bitterness. We feel lethargic. We feel indifferent. And those are always the indications that all you need to do is tune into your heart. You just need to go there with yourself for a few precious moments and connect back in. And it's not to say that you aren't allowed to feel bitterness and resentment, but there's something that's very medicinal about coming back to who you are. The reminder that the heart-centeredness can be quite the remedy for the disconnectedness, the apathy. Now, as we are going to watch this whole Mars retrograde, Mars is going to retrograde back into the sign of Cancer. So we're also going to be looking at our identity through the lens of Cancerian things. So go back and listen to my Cancer episodes. If you haven't listened to those already, those are full of so much rich information. But Cancer is how we feel. And on a very deep level, it's about how we're actually processing emotions. It's about the feelings that come into our chest. It's about what we hold in our system in terms of things that feel good or things that feel bad. Cancer also represents our familial connections and our memories. So there's a lot. Cancer can be a very heavy energy. It can also be such a beautiful energy, though, because it's where we feel, it's where we actually get connected with the potency of our emotions. So as Mars heads back into the sign of Cancer, again, we're going to have to turn our minds off that part of us that wants to logically process every single thing that we're feeling. And we're going to have to look at how we feel. And tuning into your heart can be such a powerful way to process how you feel, because the heart cannot turn it off and on. The heart is a very clear conduit for what is really happening. We talk about this a lot with the body. The body doesn't lie. When you tune into your heart, you can feel so many layers of emotion. You can feel everything from joy and peace and relaxation to some flavors of sorrow, some flavors of sadness or depression or grief, and it's all okay. And that's part of what we're doing here, is that we are accepting that whatever it is that we're working with is okay. And in that acceptance is where there's going to be room for things to shift around a little bit and change and grow. So when we talk about emotions, a lot of us are very consistently good at feeling our emotions when it comes to, like, I'm pissed, or I'm annoyed, or I'm anxious. And when we feel into those emotions, what are we trying to do? Usually we're trying to stop them or we're trying to discharge them. And sometimes that looks like we are mad at somebody. This is somebody else's fault. This is a problem that somebody else has created for me. And then that anger morphs into resentment, it morphs into moodiness, etc. And so when we say, I'm good at feeling my emotions, sometimes that's what we're good at, is we're good at getting agitated and we're getting riled up and annoyed at how life is working out for us in any moment. But how good are you at feeling into things like the sweetness and the boredom and the nothingness? How good are you at just being with whatever is here? We get our minds involved and our minds want to get moving and solve and create solutions. And so a lot of times when we're dealing with flatness, boredom, nothingness, again, we want to get in and fix it. We want to change it. And when we're feeling excitement and happiness and joy, how often do we sit with those things and let them be there? Probably not very often because we get distracted again pretty quickly into, oh, here's what we need to do, here's what's going wrong. And so, my point in bringing all of this up is to get you to start paying attention to how often you are actually connected to your heart. How often are you just there for your heart as a friend, where you are simply holding space for whatever is going on inside that heart without trying to fix it, change it, improve it, or even have an attachment to how long the joy is there or how long the excitement is able to maintain. So take a deep breath, tune back into your heart. And just imagine with every in breath that your heart is expanding. And with the out breath, you are letting go of anything that feels tight or constrictive. And you're going to practice, if you wish to take on this homework, you're going to practice just being with whatever is in your heart and like a good friend, sitting and holding space. You know how you have those friends or those family members where you can just sit in silence and it's totally fine. It's not awkward. You're not trying to generate conversation. You're not worried about what to say or how they're going to perceive you. You're just there. Practice being that kind of friend to your heart. And know that this retrograde lasts from December 6th to February 23rd. So there are 2 months plus of this working with how we tap into our hearts, how we tap into our feelings, and how we use what we discover to help us form a stronger concept of who we are. And we know that as the North Node has been moving through Aries, and Chiron has been moving through Aries, and now Pluto is in Aquarius, which opposes Leo, that these questions of who we are become even more important than they were before. And the thing is that this question is not so easily answered because tuning into the things that make us feel confident and vibrant and creative, we forget to do that. We get so busy with all of the other things going on in our lives. But taking some pointed time every single day to feel what warm-heartedness feels like in your body, to seek out the things that feel inspiring. And these can be found in really small ways. Taking a few moments to appreciate the beauty of the sky, taking a minute to pet the cat, or to just take a deep breath of clear, fresh air and just moving into some gratitude and some appreciation for all of the beauty that you have access to on a regular basis. That can be very heart connecting And I know that we all have people like this in our lives where we feel like we're just talking and they don't really see us, or we feel that they're incredibly self-centered, and we would even go so far as to call them narcissistic. Now, the next time that you're with one of those people, see whether you can feel their heart. And my guess is that you probably won't feel their heart, and there's a lack of what feels like heart connectedness between the two of you. And that's really hard. It's really hard to be around people like that because it feels like it's all about them. And they're unable to even hold space for their own heart. So how could they hold space for yours? But the remedy for that is to then be in your own heart space. Spend time in the middle of your conversation with them. You can give half of your attention to your own heart and half of your attention to what they're saying, and see whether that shifts it for you. Because as we're doing this Mars retrograde work and we are tuning into our heart and our emotions, we have to be doing that as consistently as possible, because that is how we end up finding out who we are. That's how we end up with this strong, unbreakable connection with the self and thereby with our source. And when we have that connection, we don't have to spend so much time chasing it. We don't have to figure out, if I buy this thing, will I feel excited in my heart? If I have this relationship, will I feel enthusiastic and magnetic? If I take this class, will I feel creative and courageous, right? We can do all of those things to help bolster who we are, but ultimately this quest for self has to be done in a very private way, in a very moment by moment way, and we can practice every day as we're moving through the world, and most especially through a Mars retrograde. So this is your invitation to practice feeling, to practice connecting in, to being with your heart and learning more about yourself through the simple practice of spending time with your heart, understanding what it is trying to talk to you about. All right, I hope this was helpful. I will see you all soon.